Okay, Piaget, the pre-operational stage, this is going to be ages 2 to 7. The first Piaget stage was sensory motor, trying to coordinate sensations that are coming in and perceptions with physical movements in the environment. During this time, the pre-operational stage, children begin to represent the world with words, images, and drawings. Kids, they start to also form these stable concepts and are beginning to use their questioning and reasoning abilities. However, they're slightly off their reasoning abilities. So their thoughts are dominated by egocentrism and magical beliefs. We'll cover those a little bit more on the next slide. Also, during this stage, so this is pre-operational, children do not yet perform operations. And operations, what they are reversible mental actions. So pre-operations, before operations. A good example of an operation in a couple slides when we talk about conservation. There are 2 substages to the pre-operational stage. The first one is the symbolic function substage. For this one, the kids, they gain the ability to mentally represent an object that is not present. So example, maybe they begin to draw things like cars and people. So they have an idea of the car in their mind, and they may not even have a car in front of them, but they can still draw one. So they're representing the world with these images. They also begin to use language more effectively, efficiently. They engage in pretend play also. So basically they're being able to be more creative, use their minds to represent things that actually aren't there, to pretend. There are 2 important limitations for this, egocentrism and animism. Egocentrism is the inability to distinguish one's own perspective from someone else's. Example from the textbook. If a father calls home to his 4-year-old daughter and says, is mom home? And the girl nods her head. She doesn't understand that the dad cannot see her nodding her head. So that's an example of egocentrism. So from her perspective, that's just all she can see. Some people get better at this as they age than others. Some kind of get stuck there a little bit. Animism, the other limitation, is the belief that inanimate objects have lifelong qualities and are capable of action. So something like, if a kid said something like, the sun comes out because it likes me. That's animism. This computer is not working because it hates me. That's animism. The next substage is the intuitive thought substage. And this is where children will use primitive reasoning and they want to know the answers to questions. Basically, they're trying to figure things out. So you want to try to help them. You want to encourage that. You want to, help them to produce like a scientific mind almost, to try to figure things out. But it's still primitive. As an example, a kid at this stage only has a vague conception of what they need to do to cross a street, so they can't exactly figure things out. The idea of the timing, the cars are going this way and you've got to cross at a certain time. They can't piece all that together. Why questions? So this will signify an interest in reasoning. So I remember one of my nephews when he was about 4. Yeah, it was exactly 4. Why? Every question I would answer, his response to that answer would be why. They ask a lot of why questions at this time, and the results or the responses end up kind of be circular because you're just going back and forth. But again, they're trying to reason and they're trying to figure things out, and so you should try to encourage that if you can. There are 2 important limitations on their ability to figure things out. The first one is centration, and this is centering the attention on one characteristic to the exclusion of all other characteristics. So for example, if you see this tube or container compared to this container, you might think that this container holds more because it's bigger. That would be centration. You're just focusing on taller. That it's taller, and so that it might hold more because you're just focusing on that one characteristic of it. The other idea is conservation, that altering a substance's appearance does not change its basic properties. This is figure 5.4. This is Piaget's conservation task. And so basically what they did is they have 2 containers here that are equal, and the kid can look at it and he could tell that they're equal. And what they do then is they pour this one into this one. And so it's a smaller, round, but taller tube container. Now the kid sees you pour it into there. And then if you ask them which one of these 2 containers has more, this one, the tall one, or the shorter one, they will say that the tall one does because it looks bigger to them. It's taller and it looks like it has more, even though they know that it came from this container and that those 2 are equal. They can't quite put all that together. And so this is a conservation task. the idea that changing the properties of this container, it doesn't actually change how much fluid it holds, if that makes sense. And then also, yes, so centration, focusing on just the one characteristic. Conservation, that the altering the appearance does not change its basic properties. Kids, Piaget thought, the kids did not get this till about 7 or 8, the conservation task. They don't get it right. If they don't get this task right, this conservation task, it means they are still in the pre-operational stage. It means they cannot perform those mental reversible actions, because when you pour it into there, an older kid is able to reverse that mentally and think, okay, it went into this one, but I remember it being back into this one, and they were the same size. Just kind of as an FYI, other psychologists later on thought that Piaget underestimated kids, and he thought later researchers thought that they could be taught to pass this task before they were 7 or 8, which is probably accurate. 7 or 8 is that's pretty long to not be able to teach them about this. All right, on the next slide, so that's Piaget. On the next slide, we'll start to discuss Vygotsky.